When you think about the smartest, most tactical generals in military history, you think of people like Napoleon, Patton, Alexander the Great, William the Conqueror, George Washington, Ulysses S. Grant even. And some people may even add Robert E. Lee. Now, Robert E. Lee fought for the wrong side of history, right? He fought on the Confederate side that was for slavery. But just because someone is on the wrong side of history doesn't mean that they still can't be a decent human being. Robert E. Lee should be considered one of the greatest generals in American history and even world history. We know Robert E. Lee had a lot of great tactics. His only flaw in being a general was going into the offense instead of staying on defense, letting the people come to them, letting the Union come down to the Confederates. They decided, let's take the Confederacy to the Union, thus ending the Civil War. And sure, he was fighting for slavery, but he was a noble and morally pretty good guy. I mean, to be fair, he was against guerrilla warfare. He's the reason guerrilla warfare was not used by the Confederacy in the Civil War. He said it's going to be unproductive bloodshed. We do not need this. This will rip the country apart more than we need it to. I mean, you and I both know that if the Confederacy started using guerrilla warfare, who knows how long the Civil War could have gone on? It could still be going on today, because that means you do whatever, you use any means necessary. You never surrender. You break any rules you can to get a leg up. It's not a good way of fighting. Look at Vietnam. The horror stories that you hear in Vietnam are from guerrilla warfare. The Viet Cong were horrible in their acts of war. Robert E. Lee was passionately against guerrilla warfare. He said, this is not a good thing, and I cannot bring myself to do it, therefore my army of Virginia will not do it. You may not also know that Robert E. Lee was against secession. He did not want the South to secede, but he felt after Virginia seceded, he needed to be loyal and follow his home state, and so he became one of the Confederates' most important, probably the most important person in the Confederacy. He was very opposed to Confederate monuments. He didn't want anybody to praise the Confederacy. They tried, they lost. We need to move on. He was very big on moving on. Keeping monuments, keeping reunions alive is keeping the Southern thought process and way of living alive, and thus not moving forward. Thought it was a bad idea. He was also very against slavery. He thought it was morally and politically evil. But just because he has some good ideas doesn't mean he's a great person. He thought it's good to keep some freedom, and he even thought black people couldn't govern themselves correctly. So I would not take his word for it. Yes, it's good he's against slavery, but saying, well, we still need it because we need freedom and we don't think the slaves can govern themselves, that's not good. After the Civil War, Robert E. Lee was big on rebuilding. We've lost, we've caused a lot of hurt, we need to rebuild. He wanted reconciliation. Let's not be bitter to the North. We lost fair and square. It's time to rebuild. Let's rebuild better. Let's rebuild so that this doesn't happen again. Let's not dwell on defeat. Let's encourage people, encourage the veterans to come together and move forward as a country and to rebuild better. And while you may think you could run the country better if you succeeded, that didn't happen. The plan failed in his eyes. Let's move on, let's rebuild, let's become stronger together. Very respectable thing, especially for a general of an opposing army. Another very telling part of Robert E. Lee being a better person than we may perceive is that he was loved and respected by people even on the Union side. Some of his most touching tributes at his funeral were Union soldiers. Ulysses S. Grant respected him so much that when he defeated him, he told his men, do not celebrate when they surrender. We're not gonna gloat. We're going to take the win, and we're going to try and rebuild. They both had that same thought of we need to rebuild, and we need to build the bridge back. It's very respectable on both sides. And finally, one of the most interesting facts, factoid, if you will, piece of datum, is that before joining the Confederacy and joining his home state of Virginia, he was offered command of part of the Union Army. Who offered him this command? Well, none other than our former president, Abraham Lincoln. Well respected. Do not get that wrong. Well respected, not by me, not by some Southern sympathizer either, but by the President of the United States of America, by people on the opposite side of him, by most historians, by people who have looked into the Civil War. Just because in your textbook in school, when it got to the part about the Civil War and slavery, General E. Lee was the general of a lot of the Confederate Army, does not mean that he necessarily is the bad guy. Sure, he fought on the wrong side. That's okay. Darth Vader fought on the wrong side. And look, he ended up being a good person, didn't he? He ended up changing his ways at the end of his life. And keep in mind, he did all of this without having a father. He had no real father figure in his life. His dad left him because he was so debt-ridden that he had to just constantly be on the run. I'm pretty sure he died in the Caribbean, didn't really keep in touch with his son too much. So Robert E. Lee was raised by a single mother who learned how to work hard, work smart, and be very diligent in what he did and learn the ways of what he did. He became one of the greatest and smartest generals of the last 500 years, you could say. So, wrong side of history, but still has some redeeming qualities. Robert E. Lee was maybe a better person than we first thought, than we were first taught.